So thank you, Peter, for the introduction. I just want to preface this by saying that this is still an early draft. As Armando put it, this actually started out as a discussion between Peter and I. A little bit about what we were talking about. We started off by just talking about the supply chains. Now, FactSet just acquired my old company, Revere Data. We've been providing supply chain data for the last 8 years, and like one of the projects that I've taken on is really to dive deep into supply chain to try and understand what are the key local economic forces which are driving sort of these companies. And like some of the questions that we've always been curious about are the customer stocks driving the suppliers? Is there a like lead lag effect, as was shown by Lauren Cohen about 4 years ago in his paper, Economic Links and Predictable Returns, or is it the other way around? Are there certain industries where the suppliers really have all the power and they are driving the sort of customer stocks in any actual given sort of time period? And like one of the things that Lauren Cohen had predicated his entire paper was that analysts have a hard time incorporating new information about trading partners, right? So if you have a portfolio of like 25 customer companies, and you're saying that whatever's happening around these like 25 actual customer companies is driving you as a supplier stock. Can a single analyst that is looking at a supplier company look at all 25 companies, what's happening around it, and like there's a lead lag effect in incorporating that new information of his sort of trading partners. Now, one of the things that RavenPack does is actually gives me, well, what is the media attention around a actual company? So the way this entire thing started out was that we were kind of studying supply chain in isolation, and Peter and RavenPack were looking at news data, news like volume data, or the way I would put it in English is like media attention. How much news is there around a company relative to what an average news is of the company over a given period of time, right? So for the rest of the study, I'm just going to start off by actually talking about, the actual lead lag effect. Like, does this still work? Do the customer stocks drive like the supplier stocks, or is it a vice versa? Is it contingent on certain industry sectors? And then after that, we talk about this like limited attention hypothesis. If it is hard for an analyst to incorporate information about all the customer companies, what about the information about the individual company itself that I'm taking a position on? Is there a lot of news around it, and is that news or is the media attention around a supply company itself indicative of what the future performance can be? So, like to start with, what we're doing out here is we took the Russell 3000 universe. In most of the studies that I've read, and this includes, like this is a widely researched topic these days. We've had numerous papers that have come out by, like Deutsche Bank, CompuStat, S&P, Lauren Cohen had also done it, but like the whole sort of notion was on a sort of monthly basis at the end of each month for you identify a set of supplier companies within the Russell 3000. And then for each supplier company, what you're doing is you're creating a like customer basket, right? What are my total number of customers? And like, what you're doing is you're creating a like customer momentum signal, which is the price of my customer portfolio in sort of totality driving this individual stock. And like what we do is at each cross section of time, you go long and short these suppliers, like contingent on what the customers had done in the previous actual time period. The red line is like the performance of the customer to supplier momentum. So like the customer stocks are driving the supplier stocks. The blue line are the supplier stocks driving the customer stocks, right? So is the impact sort of reversed? And I just have like the golden line as a indicator of what the S&P was doing at the same period of time. Now what you see here is that the customer supply momentum clearly is a much stronger sort of signal as compared to the supplier to the customer, which is actually done pretty poorly. And the entire strategy did extremely well during the time that, like the slide that Peter just had where he's like, it's just after like 2009, we did extremely well in this one strategy, but then it tapers off. Now, there's a lot happening behind this, and I have to once again preface that this is a long, extended study that we're trying to do. But I can tell you by looking at just what we have here that this is very dependent on industry-specific effects. There are certain industries, like if you look at the material space, that line is just a straight line going all the way up because there is a huge customer to supplier effect that is happening at a local level across all sort of market cap actual profiles. So we have these two effects. One does really well, the other one is it's not really doing that well at all. And here's just the actual performance of the customer supply momentum. It's the long short quintiles at equal weighted, no transaction costs. This is a very early draft, so I haven't added all of that stuff. But you're just seeing that most of the returns are coming from 2008 and 9. And then after that, it pretty much tapers down. If you look at the supply momentum, it's essentially flat, and you have some losing years as well. So, we have this whole thing which I just described. You have the customer stocks driving this. We know that it's actually very local. There are certain industries where you have the customers that are driving the suppliers. You have completely different industries, such as healthcare, which was interesting for me to see that healthcare, you have the supplier stocks that are actually much more predictive of what the healthcare customers are going to be doing instead of vice versa. But as Lauren Cohen said, there's a delay in processing that information. And what you're trying to capitalize on is that customers is giving me news, I'm going to take a position on the supplier stock. So this begs the question, right? What about news around the individual supplier company? We're saying that there's all this news around the analyst cannot process information on a portfolio of customers, but you could have a whole set of different analysts that are looking at the individual supplier company. So we work with this is how it all started. We were just discussing this and we were curious about it. So RavenPack provided us with an aggregate volume score that is cut at 3:30 p.m. at the end of each month. And that's kind of the score that we're actually using to be if I'm going to be taking a position on a supplier stock, is there news around the supplier stock itself? And if there is news around the supplier stock, what is that telling me? If it's a short position and there's a lot of news around it, should I be continuing with that short position? Or if there's a long position and there's no news around it, is the market not pricing in that stuff yet? So those are the types of questions that we're trying to answer. What you have here is on the horizontal, all of these things here are the supplier ranks. So you take at Russell 3000, there are about 1,400 companies that you can identify as being supplier companies. These are the companies that you're saying could be driven by their customer portfolios. So we sort them into quintiles, and then we double sort them into their news sort of volume quintile. And that is, at this point, a very simple score. It's what is your current news relative to your last 6 or 12 month news. So on average, are you, where exactly are you? What you're seeing here is that there's a very sort of, the more news you have around a company, it's almost that the market has been pricing in that information, and the forward, 1 month return, if you were to hold the actual basket, is much lower, which is the fifth, all those bars on the fifth quintile, as compared to if there's very little news about you as a given company, but all your customers are doing or are trending in a certain direction, you're seeing very different sort of return profiles. So the idea here was kind of simple. What if you just look at all these returns out here, what if you were to take a short position on a supplier company that is predicted to do really poorly because its customers are doing poorly, plus there's a lot of news attention around you. There's, sort of relative to your last 6 months, there is a lot of attention in the media for this one company. On the flip side, you're predicted to do extremely well because your customers are doing extremely well. But the market hasn't priced in that or there's barely any information about you as an individual company. That is going to be our long position. So it's about 60 positions on each side. I haven't actually broken it up into market quintiles, and we're going to be doing all of that. But here's the performance of a news filtered customer to supply momentum strategy. Now, since this is a horribly prepared slide, and I apologize for that, here's the result of the old one, right? You have the red line. Your cumulative return is 150%. You're getting IRs of like 0.6. It's not really good. Like, there's nothing that you're really seeing, and there's no trend out here at all. If I were to just skip all the way, like this is like the return of the actual news sorted. So just to repeat, I was taking a long position on companies that have been predicted to do extremely well because their customers have done extremely well, but there's very little news around you as an individual company itself. On the short side, you're predicted to do poorly because your customers have done extremely poorly, and there's a lot of media attention around you as a company, right? So, with that, that's kind of where we are at this point. This is going to be a very long paper, and I think I've been inspired by a lot of ideas that I've heard here today, but be happy to entertain any questions, whether for Peter's part or like my part in what we're doing with the study. Thank you.
Thank you, Aakarsh.
So you are not currently giving any indicators, providing indicators based on your analysis, not yet?
Not yet, not yet. So, what we're trying to do here is that because we're seeing these like bi-directional movements, right? In certain industries, the suppliers have power. In certain industries, like the customers have power. And these are very local impacts on individual companies, right? We have combined like both those signals into a sort of unified strategy that tends to work extremely well on a like monthly rebalance sort of time frame. Then we're adding in news data about these individual sort of companies itself to be like, can I refine the strategy further to isolate the impacts where the analyst really has not been looking at that company, but we're using the customer information in order to drive it.